I hope everyone had a chance to catch the InfoWars press conference from the National Press Club just a couple hours ago. I want to thank Alex Jones for inviting me up to the podium and giving me a chance to speak to everyone about the really important issue of First Amendment rights on the internet, censorship, etc. I've got a really interesting show for you this afternoon. Outside here in beautiful Washington, D.C., we've got filmmaker Greg Lovett and one of the subjects of his documentary film, Mr. Bobby Oleski. Greg, Bobby, thank you for joining me, guys. How are you today?
Well, good.
Good to see you both. Now, it's a little bit dark there, Greg, where you are. I don't know if you have the ability to turn on any lights or anything, but you've definitely pointed a light at a really serious problem, and this is something that's been affecting Bobby, and that is the dangerous and it's got to be unlawful, right? Disposal of hazardous material at U.S. military bases in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yes, the story basically, simply put, is that during the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, the military didn't really put a lot of thought into what they were going to do with the garbage on the military bases. There's about 9 pounds a day that's accumulated by every soldier on the battlefield, and they have to do something with it. What they decided to do in their wisdom was burn it. Bobby can give you more specific details, but they created these big pits on these bases, and they threw all the garbage into these pits, including everything. I mean, from metal, plastics, spent ammunition, even body parts. And of course, the result was a cloud of toxic smoke that just hung over the base. And the result is, now years later, a lot of the men and women that serve there are sick, some very sick, and some unfortunately have already passed away.
Wow. And Bobby, of course, you were there in, where were you stationed, Bobby?
I arrived on Kandahar Airfield in the first week of January 2004. And the burn pits there really hadn't taken off yet. There may have been some smaller ones from units there, you know, that were doing the heavy fighting and stuff. But the big burn pits really didn't take off until, I want to say, March or April, because everything that they were leaving behind just got put in a pile, and we were scavenging pieces, parts, and various things that we needed. And then eventually one day they came along and just said, we don't want you anywhere near that pile anymore. And then they brought in some big up-armored bulldozers and dug a big hole and pushed all that stuff in a pit and set it on fire, and it didn't stop burning from then until the time I left in April of 2005.
Wow. And so, I mean, was there some sense that this was toxic? It had to smell awful, and there's chemicals and things?
Yeah, I mean, if you just do the math, I mean, I'm not sure how many troops were there, but I mean, there were 15 or 20,000 people there, and everybody's drinking, water out of plastic water bottles, probably 10, 12, 15 bottles of water a day. Those plastic water bottles had to go somewhere. Just do the math just on the plastic water bottles that went into the burn pits, not to mention, tires and batteries and paints and pesticides and construction equipment and anything else that you could think of that they wanted to dispose of, literally was just thrown in that pit, and it was burned.
I think the average person has a sense that the military is very organized and they know what they're doing, and that's the most professional type of organization anyone could conceive of. Whose idea was this? How did it come to burning garbage? There was no plan when they went there for how to deal with all this garbage?
Well, my understanding was in the contract with Halliburton and KBR, and please understand this is just my understanding,
right?
That there were supposed to have been incinerators set up there to actually burn the trash properly, as to not put all those fumes and stuff into the air. Not one time did I ever see any incinerators being used in any way, shape, or form, except for maybe one small one that I think they did use for incinerating limbs and stuff that were from the medical clinic of guys that were wounded.
Wow, that's brutal. And of course,
I talked oh, sorry. I just want to say I've talked to several soldiers who were in Afghanistan and Iraq, and one in particular, for example, told me that he was, I don't remember the year, but he was there, and the incinerators were standing there on a pallet. He left. He went to other bases or whatever. 4 years later, he came back to that same base, and the incinerators were still there, hadn't been used.
any idea why that would be?
What I've heard is that it's a question of money. There was money for incinerators included in the budget and included in the money that KBR received, but of course, actually installing them, using them, training people to use them was more expensive than actually just burning the garbage. So they could leave the incinerators there and pocket the money.
Now, of course, KBR is Kellogg, Brown, and Root. And at one point it was Halliburton KBR. They've come together, they've split apart, but these are basically corporations that contract to the military to carry out certain duties that, what? Why can't the Army just do this stuff itself? I mean, we've heard that so many trillions of dollars have been spent on the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, and then to hear a story like this, where some corporate somebody or other makes a financially based decision that puts someone like Bobby and his colleagues and the other brave soldiers and contractors who risk their lives and safety to be in Iraq for what ostensibly is a mission to, I guess, defend freedom, and they're saving money to kill these people.
Those are questions that are really, out of our realm of being able to answer. The real question that I have is, we know how it was supposed to be done. It was supposed to be done with incinerators and trash disposed of properly, but it wasn't. So to me, the real question comes down to, who was it that decided to put the trash in the hole, set it on fire, and leave it burn? Now, was that a military directive that was given to Halliburton and KBR to just do it that way to be expedient, or did Halliburton and KBR take that decision upon themselves, just to do it that way? And I don't know the answer to that question. The only thing that I know is that the air sample qualities that I've seen were off the charts, downright dangerous. And those air quality reports were sent to the Pentagon on numerous occasions with numerous memos saying that you basically got to stop doing this. We don't know what the long-term health effects of this are. And they were just shoveled into a desk. So who's culpable? I think they're all culpable. But who's gonna step up to the plate and start kind of helping us out a little bit? A lot of us are on the verge of losing our homes. We've lost our careers, our health. We can't work.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here, wondering how we're going to make it day to day. And the only thing I'm fortunate enough to get is I do get some pretty good health care through the VA, which I'm grateful for. Because they have OHSU up in Portland, and I'm really getting some good care that way. But that doesn't fix, from 2012 going forward, me being sick and not being able to work. I mean, pretty much everything I've worked my whole life for is, it's about to blow up. And I don't know where we're going to end up on this if we don't get some kind of help.
It's a terrible story, Bobby. And so what was your role in the military? Were you in the Army, or were you working for one of these contractors?
Well, I was, I'm military of a former Air 81 through 85, but when the war kicked off in Iraq and Afghanistan, they needed contractors. So I went over from 2004 through 2005 in Iraq and Afghanistan, and started out as a mechanic and then moved in to be a logistics, kind of a parts guy, expediter, making stuff happen.
So you're paid by KBR or Halliburton or one of those?
Correct.
From 2000. None of your managers or anybody could give you any answers on this?
Oh, they were all just as dumb as we were.
Wow.
I mean, they're just, nobody knew anything about anything. It was just to put it blatantly it was just a great big giant cluster on the ground over there.
Right. And of course, many people are aware that the Vice President of the United States at the time, Dick Cheney, was at one point the CEO of Halliburton. And we know how this revolving door works, where people in the government have a tendency to maintain relationships with these corporations and even possibly direct contracts toward them, even in cases where we're hearing about this, horrendous misguided policies that cost the lives of soldiers. And it seems like nobody cares. It doesn't seem that Halliburton has come forward and paid for your mortgage, paid for your health care. Is there a lawsuit pending or anything like that?
There's a class action lawsuit that's been thrown out, I guess 2 or 3 times now. That's
thrown out.
Yeah, they threw it out 2 or 3 times. The Judge
Why?
Titus, I think in the 4th Circuit Court. I have no idea.
Judge
But
Titus?
we have another hearing coming up. I think in what is the 4th District Court, Mark, 9th or 4th, whatever it is back there, where hopefully we're going to get a fair shake. But one of the things that happens with guys that are DoD contractors, most of us are all veterans, but you're not classified as a veteran when you're in a combat zone. You're a civilian, so you're forced to file what's called a DBA claim, which is a workers' comp claim for people that work overseas. And then they tie you up in court for years and years and years and years and years, and here you're wondering how you're going to get your health care, how you're going to pay your bills, how you're going to take care of things. So eventually what they do is they just back you into a corner and kind of force you into some kind of a settlement that isn't anywhere near enough,
right?
To take care of your needs and what you've got to be done. But you get in such a position that you have to make a choice of survival today, or what are we going to do?
Right. And this
Another
sounds
thing
to me like where Greg got his tagline for the film: delay, deny, wait until you die.
Yeah,
Well, that's pretty much it. There's lots of us awful sick, and going up to the VA hospital in Portland, I meet a lot of these guys that were in Iraq and Afghanistan that have, similar cancers and similar situations, than what I do. And then the other thing that's really upsetting to me is that they created this registry for the VA for all these people supposedly been exposed to the burn pits, so they could do some analytical data. And then they had some outside group come in and study this, and come to find out it's basically worthless because of the method of collections. There's no way they could do any kind of data analysis from it. And it's just all a bunch of eye candy to me. This burn pits registry. The facts are in how many guys are sick. Look at the air quality reports. We don't burn trash like this in neighborhoods in America because we already know dioxins and breathing, all these kinds of things make people sick. But yet it's okay to go and burn them right next to the troops where they sleep. It's just poppycock, every bit of it.
Wow.
Another thing that's important to remember, Jason, is I've actually seen copies of the contracts which stated that KBR was supposed to manage these burn pits according to EPA regulations.
Right.
So they were supposed to treat these bases like a little piece of America. So it's actually illegal what they did. I mean, not only was it morally wrong, but I mean, they actually broke the contract. But coming back to the lawsuit for a second, it actually doesn't matter if the soldiers and the contractors win this lawsuit against KBR, because you mentioned Dick Cheney was formerly vice president of Halliburton, the parent of KBR. When they signed this no-bid contract to do the work on the military bases, they also got an indemnification. So even if they are found guilty in court, they're not going to have to pay anything. The taxpayers are going to have to pay it all.
Let's let that soak in for a second, because that's huge what you just said there, Greg. So Dick Cheney, as the vice president, set up a no-bid contract for his former company that he was the CEO of. I don't know, but did he hold stock in the company at the time?
Yep, he held stock in the company, yeah.
So I don't know how that's not a violation of the inurement clause that everybody seems to be getting all over Donald Trump about for owning a couple of hotels that diplomats stay at. Here we've got the CEO of a company that basically manufactured a war on false pretenses, saying that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and that they were somehow involved with Al-Qaeda attacking the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on 9/11. They did not release a 28-page Senate Intelligence Committee report that linked members of the Saudi Arabian royal family to the financing of 9/11. They released some Israeli art students who have been shown to have links to Israeli intelligence. They sent members of the bin Laden family back to Saudi Arabia, and then they went and sent people like Bobby into Iraq, into a dangerous war zone where they ignored EPA regulations, ignored what everybody knows. You don't burn plastic and sit there inhaling it, and basically killed these men and women slowly over time, tortured them, and it's an ongoing torture. Bobby, please don't take this the wrong way, but you look much better than many of the subjects in the film. There are people who are suffering.
Yeah, I'm not that far down the road yet, and hopefully I won't get there. You know, I'm doing my best to try to hang on to this deal. I got no intentions of checking out, but you know, I am pretty sick. I keep getting these bone lesions, and they're radiating me in chemotherapy, and you know, I don't feel very well. I can't think very well. You know, I used to be a pretty good computer whiz, and you know, my brain just doesn't work like it used to work anymore. Physically, I can't do what I used to do, and you know, it's every day seems to be getting a little harder. You know, to be honest with you.
So perhaps looks are deceiving. What's the official diagnosis of the ailment that you've got?
Well, I've got some stuff called multiple myeloma that keeps giving me lytic bone lesions all over my skull, my femur, my arms. And I'm in chemotherapy now on my way to a 3-month bone marrow transplant up in the Veterans Facility up in Seattle, where I'll be 3 months on my back, unable to work, unable to basically do anything. Thank God my kid has family medical leave. He's going to come up there and wipe the drool off my chin while we get through the bone marrow transplant, and then we'll see where we are, you know, after that. But you know, my wife's a wreck, my family's a wreck, my dog's a wreck. You know, things just money's a wreck, and we just you know, everything is just day by day right now. The best we can do.
So sorry, Bobby.
Yeah.
And is there any way that the viewers of Crowdsource the Truth can help you financially with these bills? Do you have a GoFundMe webpage?
Yeah, I just, you know, I'm kind of muddling along right now as best I can with what I got. You know, I'm not there yet, I don't think. I hope, but I appreciate that.
Now, of course, Greg has made the film, and there's a web page that people can go to here. It's www.burnpitsdocumentary.com. And the title of the film is Delay, Deny, Hope You Die, How America Poisoned Its Soldiers. And it's won awards at festivals. Greg, where can people see the film?
Well, right now we've been doing some screenings in various cities across the country. We've got some coming up. I think there's actually going to be one in Washington again in a few weeks. We got one in Austin and Corpus Christi coming up, and so we've been doing some screenings. People can also buy a DVD on the website. It's also interesting that I know I have approached various cable channels like Netflix and Showtime and HBO, for example, and they've all turned it down.
Wow.
And I don't know if that's because they just don't like it, they don't think it's good enough or whatever. But interestingly, I have offers from countries like Iran and Russia and Iraq. You know, they want to buy it and they want to broadcast it, which is possibly logical considering the nature of those countries. But it's just interesting that some of those countries want to show it, but America so far, at least in a broader scale, I haven't been able to find, you know, a channel that's willing to show it yet. If I run that course, I'll probably just release it to most of the major digital platforms, you know, Hulu and iTunes and Amazon after the summer, and people will be able to watch it there. But the advantage to a Netflix or a Showtime or an HBO is that you reach millions of people at one time.
Right.
And when people turn down programs like this, they don't tell you why. But it's just interesting that there's a certain group of people that are interested in seeing it, and there's another group of people. I'll give you another example. We've done screenings all over the country, and in every city from LA to Albuquerque to Tampa Bay, I've been able to get local publicity to help promote the documentary. We've done either TV or radio. We did a screening in Houston, which, as you may know, is where Halliburton has their headquarters.
Right.
And Houston is the one city, coincidence or not, I don't know, that wouldn't give us any publicity. No radio, no print, no TV, no nothing. So make of that what you will.
I'll tell you, Greg, we've heard similar stories from other filmmakers who have made films about controversial topics. I did an interview with Ramsey Dennison, who directed a film called What Happened in Vegas, that's all about the corruption of the Las Vegas Metro PD and speaks a little bit about the October 1st shooting from 2017. And nobody in Vegas would show the film. What were you going to tell us, Bobby?
Well, I mean, what's really upsetting to me is this is so obvious as to what's happened. It's like I've said many times before. If you took a box 3x4x4 and pumped it full of the air that we were breathing, and you stuffed a couple of rats in there and left them in there for a week or two, and you went back and checked on those rats, they'd be dead. I mean, quite frankly, if you look at some of the air quality reports that came out of Bagram in Afghanistan and Balad, those were literally just off the charts with dioxins and all kinds of stuff that nobody should have been breathing in any way, shape, or form. And if somebody can stand there and look me in the eye and tell me if you breathe that stuff, you're not going to have any ill health effects, you need to have your head examined.
The Force did their own study back in 2006, and one of their own people wrote a memo in which he said, first of all, it was the worst environmental site he'd ever seen. I think he was talking about Balad specifically.
Yes.
But he was also talking about that the burn pits were going to cause illness among soldiers, and the Air Force just buried that memo. So they knew about this at least in 2006. Obviously, probably earlier, but there's documentation. See, I show the memo in the documentary. They just completely buried the memo. They never told anybody, and they just went on, business as usual.
And now, there's that book that's come out, the poisoning of American soldiers. We come to find out that some of these pits were even built on top of chemical weapons dumps now.
Wow.
Which
How could they do this,
which is even worse.
How could they allow this to happen?
Well, they did no ground sampling. They did anything. It's the fog and the heat of war. And the other thing that really amazes me is, how they could, on Kandahar was, my biggest experience with this, was how could they put a burn pit in the prevailing winds, to the west of the base, and have that stuff just blow over the base. You'd think if anybody had any common sense, they would have put it, on the other side of the base or moved it somewhere where the prevailing winds wouldn't have carried that. And then the other big thing, too, is it's not necessarily covered here, but there's a 5-acre sewage pond that's just west of the base there in Kandahar. So everything that you touched was covered in dried feces. Everybody had dysentery basically the whole time they were there. I came home with like 19 different parasites.
Oh my God.
And then the other thing that seems to be neglected is the radioactive water that we were drinking over there that nobody's touched on. The water bottles, when they're put out in the sun, they release an extra hydrogen atom which contaminates the water with something called tritium, which makes it radioactive. And if you consume a little bit of it, it's no big deal. Or if it hits you on the outside of your skin, it's no big deal. But if you're consuming 15 or 20 bottles of this a day, both the FDA and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission websites clearly state the consumption of tritium increases the risk of bone cancer. And that's what I got. Wow. So I think it's just a big conglomeration of everything that guys were exposed to over there. It's the dust, it's the water, it's the sewage, it's the toxins from the burn pits. War is ugly. Everybody knows that. But there's no reason to make it any unsafer than it already has to be, which they did.
Right. That's crazy. We've heard a lot about depleted uranium munitions that were used in wars in the Middle East. Were you exposed to any of that as well?
I imagine everybody was. I don't have any, problems with that. But my understanding with the depleted uranium is that the particle size is so small that it gets down into the lung, and it's metallic, and it scars the alveoli and gives guys COPD, and then they come up with lung cancer and stuff because of the radioactivity of that. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those issues as of yet.
Wow.
Hopefully, I never will.
Now,
One of the
Greg,
doctors that I talked to
yeah,
done a lot of work with the soldiers that have lung disease. He's done a number of biopsies on these soldiers, and actually, as you said, Bobby, he's actually found particles of metal inside their lungs, and a lot of these people have incurable lung disease as a result.
Yes, and it's all being ignored.
and of course,
Well,
Greg,
I'd just like to mention one thing. The doctor, this is also interesting. Dr. Robert Miller, who works at Vanderbilt University, he's one of the first people who kind of came out and linked burn pits with some of the illnesses that the soldiers were experiencing. In the beginning, it was actually the DOD that sent soldiers to him. A lot of them were complaining about lung issues that they were having, and they would have lung tests, traditional lung tests, and nothing would show up. But it was clear something was wrong. And he started to do these biopsies, and he linked it to the burn pits. And then the DOD, rather than solve the problem, just simply stopped sending sick soldiers to him.
wow.
Pretty much, yeah.
So we've basically got a sort of systemic policy of ignoring the needs of the soldiers, seemingly deliberately putting servicemen and women in harm's way in the most toxic possible environment. It's hard to understand why anyone would comply with that. We really don't have an answer, do we?
No. If a guy shot, loses an arm, loses a leg, that's something that they can easily see and they can easily justify. But they don't see, a guy that's got a bone tumor growing on top of his head or in his leg or in his face necessarily. So I think they just somehow don't connect they just don't connect it.
And part of the problem too is that the burden of proof is on the soldier. So if you get a disease like cancer, that obviously takes time to metastasize and to grow. You don't get cancer in a day.
Right.
So if you are out of the service for a year and then you become ill, it's up to you to prove that it's service related. Meanwhile, you're sick, you're getting treatment, you maybe have money issues, whatever the case may be. You can't work, you're tired, you're exhausted. And still, it's up to you to prove, years later perhaps, that the disease you have was actually linked to your service. And that's not always easy.
Yeah, it's damn near impossible to be.
Would I
frank
be,
about.
sorry to step on you there, Bobby, would I be accused of being a conspiracy theorist if I were to suggest that the money that Greg just mentioned, which is spent obviously on healthcare, pharmaceutical products, etc., might that motivate the desire to create? How many people are suffering from these diseases, would you guys say? How many servicemen and women? Tens of thousands.
Well, there's at least 100,000 on the registry that Bobby mentioned, but I've talked to doctors who think that there's probably 2 or 3 times that, because what also happens is you cough or you get sick. Again, this is years after you've been out of the service. And the soldiers themselves don't always link their diseases to the burn pits. So I've heard doctors tell me that there's maybe 2 or 3 times that 100,000 who are actually sick.
Wow. And do we have any statistics on what the cost per patient of treating these types of diseases are, and who is getting that money, and any of those types of things?
I don't know that.
Not that I know of.
I only know that if they were to provide the care to these hundreds of thousands, this is kind of a repeat of the Agent Orange back in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
It took decades before those guys and women were actually taken care of. And if the VA was to come out right now and take responsibility and start paying, I don't even know if they could even afford it, to be honest. So like I said, that's where the title comes from. It's in their best interest to just wait and hold off as long as they can, because the sad part is a lot of these people are going to die before they get treatment. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people are dying. I had two women specifically that I was going to interview for this documentary last year who died before I had a chance, and there's a lot more like them.
Well,
Yeah,
wasn't
and
there?
the question is how are they even going to? They didn't think this DoD contractor thing through very well. You know, throwing civilians into a combat zone. I mean, how am I ever going to get comped for what's happened to me?
Right.
Because I'm not a veteran. I've already filed the DBA claim, which is basically done. So, you know, the only thing I got left that is any hope for me is this suit with Motley Rice that. So, it's all right.
Well, exactly, Bobby. I mean, it's a terrible situation. I
Oh,
apologize for the
yeah, I
noise
don't
here.
know. You know, I don't know how I'm going to end it. I'm just hoping I survive this thing and land back on my feet and just can go back to work. And I've shouted from the mountaintop, and I can help those who, you know, can't help themselves. But I kind of feel like I'm basically screwed.
And the question is too, the big question I think is, you know, what's going to happen in the future? Because as we know, this happened with Agent Orange. It's happening again. And
What about the children? What about these are DNA? These are DNA mutations that are happening with this particular type of cancer that I have, other guys have. So
Right.
what about their children?
Right.
You know, there's all that too.
Well, and how
And at
about
what
their
point does the
children growing
military
up without parents?
And at what point does the military just say, "You did your job, now it's our time to do our job," you know, and take care of these people, because it's going to happen again.
I mean,
what
ultimately, in my mind, it's DOD's responsible for this. Period. The Department of Defense is responsible.
Right. Well, and I think what's important is that we need to change the laws that allow individuals to run for vice president and show deference to companies that they gain from financially. I think that's been a really big problem, is people making money from these elected positions. I mean, we've heard a lot about the Clinton Foundation, we've heard a lot about pay to play and email servers and things like that, but maybe we haven't quite looked enough at companies like Halliburton, companies like KBR, the executives that are linked to those companies that have held positions in government. Dick Cheney is still alive. Why is he not being held accountable for this?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is somebody's got to find the definitive link. If I research multiple myeloma with what I have, every place that I research, every place that I look, it all comes back to toxic exposure and heavy metals. Every place, if you research that, it just doesn't magically appear. And the only place I was ever exposed to any level of toxins or heavy metals and stuff was Iraq and Afghanistan.
Bobby, have you ever heard of Gerson therapy for liver detox?
I have not.
It's an alternative therapy. It's a non-pharmaceutical therapy developed by a German doctor in the 1940s, and it's something that I did. I obviously wasn't exposed to the level of toxicity that you were, but in about 2013, I was mercury toxic, and it was very effective in reducing the heavy metal levels in my blood. I had like 26, I think it was nanograms per microliter of mercury in my blood, and I got that down to about 9, and I did notice health effects. Perhaps you and I could talk some more about that offline. I did want to take a minute to show people the trailer from the film, if you guys don't mind. I'm just going to run that right now. You probably will not be able to hear it, but let me run that for everyone so they can get an idea of what they'll see if they purchase a DVD or a digital download of Delay, Deny, Hope You Die.
A mysterious illness is affecting veterans who were exposed to open, which the U.S. military used in Iraq and Afghanistan to torch everything from batteries to body parts.
Your nose would burn, your eyes would water, your throat would burn.
You would have to go and
dust yourself off, your hair, your clothing, with all the ashes that were falling on us.
The operation of the burn pits was exposing troops to the worst toxins known to man.
It was really, really ill, disgustingly ill.
The symptoms are anywhere from respiratory issues, some mild to severe, to rare forms of cancers.
I'm convinced that the burn pits are causing illness among these soldiers.
We thought about the consequences on the burn pit.
That is what we live next to.
The military knew all along that this toxic exposure could very well hurt the troops.
They knew about this, and they continued to frickin' do it. Why?
There was a complete denial, I think, at all levels of government.
There seems to be an ongoing struggle between the truth seekers and the government.
Every single time there's a war, we do this song and dance with the government.
What is our future gonna be like? What does it hold? It's just gonna get worse.
It's a powerful trailer and a powerful film. I had the opportunity to view the film the other day, and it's a really moving piece of work, Greg. I wonder, you know, part of what we try to do here at Crowdsource the Truth is bring together filmmakers like yourself and people with firsthand experience like Bobby, and people in the audience who might be lawyers, who might be, I don't even know, people from all different walks who come together and maybe can help move something forward. I mean, what about suing Dick Cheney personally for his involvement in setting up this type of screwy deal? I mean, he was a key stockholder, CEO, whatever. He was the vice president. He made all these decisions. I mean, maybe we can't hold him accountable for criminal activity, but could someone bring a class action suit? A man's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Why not sue him? I mean, it won't bring back your health, but at least if it could alleviate some of the financial burden that some of the victims of this horrible tragedy are experiencing, maybe there's something that could be done there.
Well, that's pretty much what we've got going on with Motley Rice right now, isn't it, Greg?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The part of the problem is that the lawsuit's been going on for like 8 or 10 years already, and
people are dying.
Sorry?
People are dying.
Yeah, people are dying, and there's no end in sight. You know, they've got deep pockets. They can just keep stalling, and you know, what I would ask people what they're watching, if you really want to help, is I mean, if I can blow my own horn a little bit, is that, you know, people do seem moved when they see the documentary, and pictures can tell a lot of story, you know, a big story. So maybe, you know, people can host their own screenings. They can go to an organization called TUGG, which is TUGG.com, and they can host a screening in their own town, or they can buy a DVD and give it to their local library, or they can even hold screenings in their own American Legion offices or VFW offices or whatever. They can write to HBOs and Showtimes and Netflixes, and I think that's the power of media. It's going to have to come from the people. I think ultimately, if enough people find out about it and enough people are disgusted by it, then maybe slowly change will come. And you know, I think the
bottom line is we need legislation.
Yeah,
this needs to be dealt with on its own, separately, standalone. Here's the deal. Here's how we screwed these guys. Here's the money. Take care of them. You know, but I highly doubt that's ever going to happen.
Hopefully we can work together to make that happen. The more we have filmmakers like Greg finding out about this tragedy and making a movie and bringing it to light, bring it to my attention so I can share it with our audience. You know, it's unfortunate, gentlemen. We've, at Crowdsource the Truth, we've been targeted by a collection of malicious, anonymous individuals who think it's funny to lodge complaints with YouTube to prevent me from being able to put out videos. They like to spread false information about me to try to hurt my credibility and try to hurt the reach of Crowdsource the Truth. If we had done this interview 2 weeks ago, or if these cowardly, malicious, anonymous individuals didn't act in the way that they did, 57,000 subscribers would have the opportunity to hear this message. But because these cowards act the way they do, it reduces my ability to get the word out. But Greg, how can people contact you directly? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to the website, burnpitsdocumentary.com. My contact details are on there. We've got a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/burnpitsdocumentary. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. So we're on all social media channels. So anybody who is interested in hosting a screening or wants more information, they can get in touch with me. You know, any way that people want to help us get the word out, the better. I mean, I'm not making any money on this. That's actually an interesting story, is that like Bobby and I have never met in person. I actually have only met a few people in person because I live in Holland, which complicates things when you're making a documentary in America. But all the camera people and the editors and the guy who made the music and anybody who worked in the documentary all volunteered their time because they believed in the cause and they wanted to help get the message out.
Wow.
So anybody who's got some kind of platform or some way to help us get the documentary seen, get in touch with me. We're willing to work with anybody.
Well, that's really good that those people were doing that. And how did you first hear about this problem, Greg? Because a lot of people don't know about it.
No, I just happened to read a book because I read nonfiction, that's my thing. I'm just interested in nonfiction. And I came across a book called The Burn Pits by Joe Hickman. I don't know how, I think just on Amazon or something. I really don't remember anymore how I found the book. And it just seemed interesting to me because, like I said, I'm interested in nonfiction, and I was kind of surprised that I'd never heard about anything like this. And then as I started to read the book, I really got mad, and I thought, how is this possible? And actually, I read it a couple of years ago, and I didn't really do anything because I thought, wow, this would make a great documentary. Somebody will make this happen. But then a couple of years went by, and I never heard anything. I never saw anything. So I just got in contact with Joe. He's in the documentary. You will have seen him. And I just said, he's been on little local stories, but nothing big, no real full-length documentary. And
right.
So I said, well, okay, I guess I got to do it. And I was able to find in his town a cameraman in Green Bay, and I Skyped in and I asked him questions. And Bobby lives in Oregon, and there's other people in California and Florida and Tennessee and everywhere. And I found local people that were willing to help me, and they would do interviews for me. I got an editor here in Holland who was willing to work weeks and weeks and weeks with me, and everybody volunteered their time. It's pretty amazing. They all were really moved by the story and wanted to help.
I think everyone should be touched by this story. Obviously, people join the military and go to fight a war. They do it with the best intentions, thinking that they're protecting America and justice and liberty around the world. How do you feel about that aspect of it, Bobby, now that everything is said and done?
Well, I'm kind of angry, to be honest with you, to think that, we did what we did, and we're basically being swept under the rug and ignored. The mounds of paperwork I've had to fight through, the telephone calls I've had to make, everything that I've had to do to get the kind of help that I've needed to get has just, it's just added more trauma on top of trauma. They certainly don't make it easy for you to get the help that you need. And it's very frustrating. To know that you've been a good citizen your whole life, you've done the right things, and you went, in the military for your country, you went as a DOD contractor for your country, and nobody cares.
Not nobody. We care. I care.
Well, few. The
not
people
enough
in power.
people.
When it comes time to clean up the mess, nobody cares.
Right.
I guess is what the words are.
And do you feel that the United States intervention in Iraq or Afghanistan has had a positive impact in those countries or in the United States?
I'm not going to comment on that.
I understand. And so are you still in touch with your friends and colleagues who were with you there? Has anyone escaped this terrible fate?
Yeah, I've got lots of friends I'm in contact with all over the place, and some of them have some problems and some of them don't.
Some people don't. Well, I guess like anything, it's
seems
just
to me kind of I just want to say, it seems to me that, I mean, I wish we didn't need a military, to be honest. I wish we didn't have wars, but we do. So, okay, we have to have these people. But none of these people who go over there do it for fame or fortune. You know, they do it because it's something that they believe in.
Right.
And it just seems to me that reward is the wrong word, but they could be rewarded when they come back by maybe certain services being provided to them, like free education perhaps, but certainly health care. Why can't you just say you served, you're covered, and then it doesn't matter what you have or how you got it, just as a thank you for serving your country, since you didn't get rich doing it. You're going to get free health care and you're going to be covered. I don't know, it seems, I understand that.
Well, the health care, the health care I've got covered. The problem is when you're so sick that you're unable to work.
You don't enjoy your life at all.
Or, yeah,
you don't have health care. There are some people that I talk to, a lot of people, there's one man in the documentary who has a tracheostomy and he can't eat solid food. He has to have food through a feeding tube. But the VA doesn't pay for that. He actually has to rely on donations.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because again, he can't prove that it's service related. So I don't know. It just seems like just take care of these people, and they serve the country. They should be taken care of, and then a lot of this would just be eliminated. I mean, we can suddenly find, and we're going to get into a whole political discussion, of course, but you can find money to build a wall with Mexico. You can find money to arm teachers in classrooms. You can find money to, invade countries. Why can't you find money to take care of your people? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any group that should receive free health care for life, it should be veterans of war, irrespective of how any ailment happens to arrive. I feel like if you go to war and stand there getting shot at and shooting and being in this dangerous zone, you've earned health insurance for the rest of your life at the very least. It's upsetting to me to hear that, people come home and just the mental anguish of having to deal with the bureaucracy of that paperwork while your health is deteriorating. Bobby, is there any hope of a cure for this, of reversing the effects and improving your health?
They tell me there's no cure for multiple myeloma, but they can just keep pushing it out. And, the cures are kind of on the way. The drugs and stuff they got now with some of these immune targeted therapies are really pretty good. And, I don't know, when I get done with my bone marrow transplant, we'll see where we're at. So there is no cure at this point for what I have. All they can do is just keep treating me.
Well, I wish you the best of luck in the treatment. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to cover? This is such a broad topic. I feel like we could talk about it quite a bit, but anything at top of mind?
I would only say, from my point of view, if anybody can help us get the documentary seen, please help us. Let's help us spread it.
Help get it out there.
I believe with enough awareness, if we can get it out there fast enough, we can make a difference.
I'm just amazed at the number of guys that were deployed that still are unaware of what's happened to them. It's really? Just amazing to me.
Even the people that were there don't know.
Even the people that were deployed. I mean, I talk to guys that come back all the time, and they're like, "What? Wow. What do you mean?" And then you school them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember when I was sick and coughing and puking up stuff."
Oh my God! It sounds like a horrible situation. I mean, the other thing
the air quality was so bad there. Some days you'd be walking across the compound, and if the air was just right, it would hit you and it'd drop you to your knees, and you'd literally vomit. That happened to me 2 or 3 times.
And that was from the burn pit exclusively, not that there's something in Iraq.
The burn pit, the sewage pit, the whole damn thing.
But it was from the military footprint that was placed there, right?
Yes. Yes.
So see, that's another issue that we don't hear that much about, is the ongoing toxic environmental disaster that's been created in Iraq by this war effort, that the soldiers that are there and even the civilians in Iraq are suffering with. It's really terrible. I mean,
well, that's a whole nother story, and I know that the Iraqis and Afghanis were our enemy, but there's a lot of civilians over there too who were just sort of minding their own business, and You know, the smoke from the burn pits didn't stop at the border of the base.
Poison them too.
Yeah, there's a lot of reports coming out now.
I was reading an article, something about the rate of birth defects and stuff around Kandahar.
Yes,
You know,
very high.
Yeah.
Very high.
That's a whole nother documentary.
Yeah.
I wonder how the executives from these companies can sleep at night knowing these things. It's really terrible.
They count their money.
That they do.
Yeah.
Really terrible. I mean, from the standpoint of the ongoing U.S. military effort, the more these types of things happen, the more disillusioned a veteran like yourself feels. It certainly doesn't inspire young people to want to join the military knowing that they're going to be so abused and mistreated and forgotten about when they return.
Well, the deal is with war, if you're going to go to war, you go to war and you win it and you be done and you come home. This thing where we're feeding defense contractors constantly to feed the war effort's ridiculous.
Just stay
all that
there.
Stuff, that could have just been done and cleaned up in a matter of a year or two. And it's been going on for how many years?
Would you say you've become an anti-war activist, Bobby?
No, I can't say that because sometimes it's necessary to kill people and break things. But I would say that I'm more of a, if we're going to do it, we just need to do it and get it over with.
Right. I mean, you hit on it in your previous statement there. We're not really there, it doesn't seem, to right a wrong and do a war and leave. We're there to generate business for companies like KBR.
That's kind of what it looks like to me.
It's a very sad story, gentlemen. I hope there's something that I can do to help. I hope that doing this broadcast will bring some more attention to your film, Greg. And once again, I want to let everybody know that they can go to the website. It's called burnpitsdocumentary.com, and the film is Delay, Deny, Hope You Die, How America Poisoned Its Soldiers. My guests today have been filmmaker Greg Lovett and military veteran and contractor Bobby Oleski. Is that how I pronounce your last name, Bobby?
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you guys both for joining me today. Bobby, I wish you the best of luck and improved health. And certainly if you ever decide that you would like to start a GoFundMe page or something like that, you're welcome to come on the show anytime. Greg, you as well. If there's anything that we can do to help you organize a screening, help direct some funding to some of the victims of this horrendous deed of irresponsible corporate greed, basically, if there's anything that I could do to help you, please call on me. And once again, anything else you guys would like to say before we wrap it up for right now?
No, we just wish somebody would work to straighten this mess out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys, and best of luck. I hope I'll speak to you again in the future. I want to thank everyone for watching. I'll see you later.
Bye. See you later, Greg.
Thanks.